Good morning. I'll call to order the regular meeting of the Zoning and Planning Committee. Today is September 29th, 2016. I'm Lisa Bender. I chair the committee. We have a quorum with Council Members Reich, Goodman, Andrew Johnson, and Council President Johnson. Today we have 6 items on our agenda. We have 3 items for public hearing, 2 items on our consent agenda, and then a 6th item that is for discussion at the end. We'll begin with the 2 items on consent. That's item number 4, which is passage of an ordinance amending our zoning code related to our parkland dedication fees. And item number 5, which is referring to staff and ordinance amending our zoning code for floodplain regulations and maps consistent with the requirements of the National Flood Insurance Program. Does anyone want to pull those off or discuss items 4 or 5? Right, I will move items 4 and 5. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Those carry. That brings us to the first item on our public hearing agenda. We'll start with a staff presentation. This is an interim use permit at 2 Dowling Avenue North.
Good morning, council members. This is an interim use permit for Ramsey Excavating to allow a concrete, asphalt, and rock crushing facility on the property located at 2 Dowling Avenue North. This is the northern parcel that makes up the Upper Harbor Terminal site. In October of last year, the City Council approved an interim use permit to allow the applicant to operate a temporary crushing facility on the property, and that permit expires October 9th of this year. The applicant is here today to request an extension to that permit to the end of December of 2017. The applicant has been stockpiling aggregate products on the site for some time, and then for the past year has been crushing those products. No complaints have been received by the city in the past year. We are recommending approval of this request subject to conditions of approval related to dust, erosion control, and noise, which are the same conditions that were placed on the permit last year. And that is all that I have this morning. I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff before we open the public hearing? No. So we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Would anyone like to speak on item number 1? Would anyone like to speak? Last call. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing. Council President.
Madam Chair, I will move approval of the conditional use, interim use permit, and just say that we have worked very closely with staff and Ramsey Excavating to make sure that this timeline for being able to use this land concurs with the plans that we have for the Upper Harbor. It's been an interesting exercise in finding out just how much of a need we have for industrial land in the city of Minneapolis. There's great demand for the land that we have available. We had a developers meeting a few weeks ago, and 61 people expressed interest in the Upper Harbor. So we know we're going to have some development proposals. They will be due in October. So we know that this timeline can fit with what happens with the Upper Harbor. We know practically we're not going to see any construction next year, probably the year after. So thanks, great work with staff and Ms. Ann Calvert, who's been just a great shepherd of working on this project. So I'll move approval.
Thank you. We have a motion for approval. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in approval, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that carries. Item number 2, our 4th item, is a conditional use permit and variance appeal for 200 Central Avenue Southeast, the Alatus project, and we'll begin with a staff presentation as well. How many people would like to speak during the public hearing on this item? Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Chair Bender, committee members. This project you've seen before, it hasn't changed much since you last heard the appeals for the Heritage Preservation Commission applications. So we're looking at the properties at 200 Central Southeast and 113 2nd Street Southeast, excuse me. Just to recap on what's proposed here, we have a mixed-use building, ground floor retail proposed, 214 dwelling units. Again, the retail will be fronting along Central. We have our residential entrance off of 2nd, the 4-story base, and then the tower above. So the Planning Commission did approve all the applications related to this project, but the appeal before you is just for the conditional use permit for height and the floor area ratio variance. And so the height increase is requested to go from 4 stories, 56 feet that would be allowed in the C2 district to 42 stories, 483 feet. And that height in feet is measured to the top of the highest point of the building, that decorative parapet. The 42 stories includes a mechanical penthouse and an elevator overrun. So for the most part, the building has 40 levels, but when you add on the penthouse and the overrun, you end up at 42 stories under the zoning code. And then the floor area ratio is requested to be increased from 2.04, which was what's allowed in the C2 district with the parking density bonus, up to 14.42. So I'll just go through the findings that were made for the conditional use permit and the FAR variance. The Planning Commission did adopt the staff findings. So it was found that the proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan. This site, excuse me, this site is located in the East Hennepin Activity Center. And in this location, the growth is guided for up to 800 densities or dwelling units per acre. And that's supported in this area because it's near the downtown growth center. And what's proposed on the site is 268 dwelling units per acre. The site also falls within the boundaries of the Marcy Homes Neighborhood Master Plan. That's a small area plan that was adopted recently. And this small area plan indicates that the higher density residential development is appropriate in this location because of its location on a transit and transportation corridor and near a commercial center. The future land use is also guided for mixed use in this area. That's something supported by the C2 commercial district. But to achieve the desired density in this location, an FAR increase and a height increase would be needed. And then moving on to some of the surrounding context. There's a mix of uses in this area. It's also in a historic district. So most directly adjacent to this property would be the Pillsbury Library to the north. And that's a contributing building in the historic district. To the east is the St. Anthony parking ramp. That's a 9-level parking ramp, takes up half of the block here. To the south across 2nd Street would be the Winslow condominiums. That's a 12-story building. And then to the east, the closest properties are 2-story townhouse structures, and then Chute Square kind of to the northwest. But generally in this area, there's a mix of sizes of buildings from 1 to 26 stories in height. And staff did note that the requested increase is a pretty substantial deviation from what would be allowed in the C2 district. But in looking at that surrounding context, and I'll go give some examples, it is compatible with the surrounding area. So again, the parking ramp at 9 levels, that's 98 feet in height. The Winslow House condos to the south is 180 feet in height, and just over about a block away to the west is the Reeve condominiums, and that height is 310 feet. So we do have other examples of very tall structures with a larger scale. The proposed building also breaks up its massing to reduce adverse impacts. Thank you. The base is a 4-story podium, and that takes up most of the site. The top of that podium is just under 60 feet as measured to the parapet. And that base is also oriented to the adjacent streets, 2nd Street and Central Avenue. And then looking at the tower itself, that footprint is half of the podium, so much smaller footprint for the site. It's set back from the streets, and it's over 30 feet from the adjacent Pillsbury Library, those upper stories. On the 1st floor, it is built up to the lot line, but they've recessed the upper stories. So we have a pretty significant separation. So with those setbacks, it was determined that the access to light and air surrounding properties would be maintained. We also looked at shadowing, and it was determined that those shadowing impacts would not be significant given the context of the area. No one property would be shadowed throughout the day. It won't be significantly shadowing any other properties more than some of the other buildings in the area as well. We also looked at the preservation of views of landmark buildings, significant open spaces and water bodies, again, finding that the impact would not be significant. With the Pillsbury Library to the north, some views of that building would obviously be impeded because it's only a one and a half story building or so. But even if you were to construct a 4-story building, which would be allowed by the district, the same view would be impeded. So the additional height wouldn't have additional impacts there. Chute Square I mentioned, that's part of the historic district, and the Mississippi River is about 2 blocks away. We looked at any possible impacts there, and in the historic district, no significant views were identified that would be impeded by this building to those significant landmarks and water bodies. We've also looked at the traffic impacts and determined that adequate measures would be taken to minimize traffic congestion in the streets. They've, as proposed, would be meeting and exceeding vehicle and bicycle and loading requirements. The residential parking would have 389 spaces. That includes some tandem spaces. The restaurant would be parked over, they do valet, and be parked over in the adjacent parking ramp. And there's some additional short-term parking that would be located along the street for visitors and patrons of the restaurant. This is also an area that has very convenient access to other modes of transportation. Just at the corner of Central and University, there's access to 22 transit routes. Also, this is right on a bike network. It's very well connected here. Very walkable area. There's lots of services and amenities nearby. And the applicant did complete a draft TDMP. It's very close to being finalized. Again, it was concluded that the proposed development wouldn't have any significant impacts on traffic operations. They've also are proposing to implement some strategies, designating a transportation corridor for coordinator for the building, having a real-time transit screen in their lobby, things like that, and also charging for some parking spaces. So when you buy your unit, you would also have to buy a parking space in addition to that. It wouldn't just come with it. Lastly, one other thing with the findings, there was no issue with determining that there would be adequate utilities, access, and other facilities for the proposal. Public Works has looked at it and not identified any major issues. And just with the Planning Commission and their review, they did reiterate a lot of points that were made in the findings, but they also did note some other things that I'll mention. They'd noted that we don't only have tall buildings in downtown. Additional density is needed to support transit. They also noted that the way they've designed the building, that it's mitigating the increased bulk and that the base of the building is oriented towards pedestrians. So just to recap, just given the guidance, the policy guidance that we have, and for higher density here, the context of the area, and that the way the project is designed, it was determined that the proposal would not have significant effects on surrounding properties, and that the height and FAR increases would be reasonable. That concludes my presentation. I can take any questions.
Are there any questions for staff? There are not. Okay. And as you noted, this is the 4th presentation and public hearing we've had about this project. So we have a full record from those, as well as the full appeal in our packets and available to council members. So with that, I'll open the public hearing. We will begin with the applicant and then those who are here to speak in favor of the project. And then we will turn to the appellant, those who've appealed, and those who are here to speak against the project. There'll be time at the end if anyone doesn't fit neatly into those categories. So I would like the applicant to please come up. So for each side, if you will, I'd like to ask you to stick to 10 or 15 minutes for the main presentation, and then each member of the public will have 2 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commission members. My name is Bob Lux. I'm with Alatus, 201 South 11th Street in downtown Minneapolis. I live. We have been before you numerous times before. I will make my remarks brief. I really want to touch on 3 items. first of all, why we chose to build this building or want to propose to build this building in this location. And then secondly, kind of the justification in what we're trying to do to mitigate the issues of doing a 40-story tower in this location. First of all, 2 years ago, when we became interested in the site and put it under contract, we reached out to numerous stakeholders in the neighborhood as well as within the community. Our first proposal was to do a taller apartment building of approximately 390 units. After numerous discussions with a lot of the city staff, stakeholders within the Marcy Homes and the Nicollet Island neighborhood, as well as the kind of community at large, I can put it, we were really persuaded to do condominiums. Condos, as you all know, as the community knows, is a difficult lift for a developer to do because of the liabilities associated with them and the demands from the buyers of what they need to attract them to a site. The site is actually perfect for a condominium buyer because of the amenities that are in the area. As Janelle and staff have mentioned, the walkability scores on this site are probably the best in the entire city, and the transit availability is tremendous. But also it offers the opportunities for not only move-up buyers or move-up renters that would become buyers that are currently living in downtown to move and stay in downtown Minneapolis, but also for us to attract buyers from the suburban locations or from outside of our metro area. And one of the things that I've always focused on in our developments that we get involved with is how do we have a holistic view to our community. And to have a holistic view, we have to attract people that manage and run and own larger companies that want to have an opportunity to live in a building such as the one that we're proposing. So that is one of the biggest moves that we made initially in this, was to go to a condominium structure. The second one was working with Marcy Homes. And Marcy Homes really wanted us to be respectful to the heritage of the neighborhood by doing a podium that is not representative of the 1900s, but one that reflects the surrounding buildings, which is really led by the Pillsbury Library. It's a limestone structure, but we also have to deal with a 9-story parking garage that is probably one of the ugliest structures that is built in the city of Minneapolis. The entire base of the building that we're building has a limestone facade on it. And it's very unique. ESG, the architectural firm, is the one that has been involved with the entire design of this building, and we believe they've done an excellent job of working with the pedestrian experience and really integrating it into a historic neighborhood. The tower is a point tower. It's slender. It's from a footprint size, it's approximately 12,000 square feet, which in comparison to the Carlisle, which is almost 14,000 square feet, it's 15% less in size and scale than what the Carlisle would be. There's some metrics that you have to work out because of the core of those buildings that you can't go smaller than that and make them work. And the third thing is really how do we make it so that the residents that move into this building also integrate into the neighborhood. And the price ranges of these units will there'll be units that'll sell for over $1 million, but the units will also start in the $300,000 range too. So there's going to be a wide variety of price ranges. And we believe that it actually, once they're built, the buildings like this really do integrate well. And the height of the building, once you're up over 15 or 20 stories, the height of the building really does not affect the neighborhood. So we believe that we're in compliance with the comp plan for the city of Minneapolis in the high activity area that we're located. And we're just very excited about being able to start this project and move forward. I'm available for any questions at any time.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? The attorney come up.
Good morning, council members. I'm Carol Lansing, attorney at Faegre Baker Daniel, also working with the applicant here. I just want to add a few remarks regarding um, the findings that you need to make. Earlier this week, I submitted a letter that goes through each of the findings for the CUP invariance, and I won't go through all of those again in this testimony, but wanted to focus on a couple of key issues. First, the land use guidance for this site. The appeal argues that the height in the FAR of the project and the very high density development that that height in FAR allows are not consistent with the comprehensive plan and the small area plan. They acknowledge that the comprehensive plan now says that very high density up to 800 dwelling units per acre may be appropriate in activity centers near growth centers. As consistent with applicable small area plans, and this project is in an activity center near the downtown growth center. The project will have 268 dwelling units per acre. But the appeal goes on to make two inaccurate statements regarding land use guidance. The first is that they state that the site is guided commercial and that commercial areas are generally not intended for residential or high density residential. That's inaccurate. With the adoption of the small area plan, the Marcy Homes plan, the guidance for this site has been changed to mixed use. It's not commercially guided. The second error is that they say that the small area plan guides it for high density residential and that density residential caps out at no more than 120 dwelling units per acre. That's also inaccurate. This is the future land use map for the Marcy Home Small Area Plan. I don't know if you can zoom in, but this parcel right here is where the project site that's pink, that's guided mixed use. These parcels to the southeast are guided for high density residential. The small area plan has no limits or discussion about maximum density on mixed use guided parcels. And this is also relevant to concerns that have been raised about the precedential nature of this decision. There's concern about potential future redevelopment of this area, which is the General Mills properties. So this plan does have specific guidance for high density, so more in the up to 120 dwelling unit per range. So the Alatus project will not be precedent for these sites. They have different land use guidance. But just to repeat, there is no limit on density in either the comp plan or the small area plan. The guidance does support and is consistent in both plans with the very high density that's proposed. The other comprehensive plan, they go through other comprehensive plan policies. I just want to note that the ones related to historic preservation have been decided by this council when you approve the certificate of appropriateness. I'd also like to briefly address the standards for practical difficulties for the variance. The variance requires a finding of practical difficulty in complying with the strict letter of the ordinance. There's a statute that creates this practical difficulty standard, and one of the key principles of that statute is that the variance be found to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. One of the reasons there can be, so this acknowledges that you can have a project that doesn't meet the strict letter of the ordinance, but is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and that's very relevant to a finding of practical difficulties. And one of the reasons that mismatch can happen is because the zoning code doesn't regulate on a parcel by parcel basis. And so having the flexibility, the ability to address through variance inconsistencies with comprehensive plan goals is a legitimate, important, and regularly applied practice in this city. Also, as discussed in the staff report and our submissions, there are the combination of land use features and policies that apply to this site are unique because they don't apply to C2 zone property throughout the city. And Janelle has gone through those policies with you. With respect to the magnitude of the height and the variance, the magnitude, whether you put it into some percentage or some number of stories difference, the magnitude is not relevant if the outcome, if the result is reasonable, because the standard also requires a finding of reasonableness. And both the height and the FAR of this project are reasonable and meet the required findings, primarily because they are compatible with the character of the area. Over the years, there's been several tall and very tall buildings built in the East Hennepin area. A new 21-story building is under construction now on the Superior Plating site. And nor are is the application in terms of their magnitude before you breaking new ground. Recently, the city approved a 26-story building with a 11.1 FAR at 600 Washington. That was actually approved on consent at the Planning Commission. And it is located in an activity center just next to the University Growth Center and was found to be compatible with character. So again, I'm here for questions. The architects are here if you have questions about the design of the building. And we request that you do deny the appeal and approve the project.
Thank you. Any questions? We have none. So we'll go ahead and ask anyone from the public who would like to speak in favor of the project to please come up, state your name and address for the record, and we'll have 2 minutes per person. And again, the two issues before us today are the conditional use permit for height and the FAR variance. All of the other issues have already been acted on.
Thank you. My name is Arvon Fraser. I'm a former president and chair of the Land Use Committee of the Marcy Homes neighborhood area, and I obviously rise as a supporter of this program. Though when I still lived in Marcy Homes, this project was not before us, but we were very aware of the site. While I was chair, we worked on the historic A-Mill project and much of the development along Main Street and in Dinkytown. We worked on this. The basis was the city plan for diversity and for sustainability and diversity in housing, and we're also aware we needed an increase in the tax base, which this will do. My view is that the very modern buildings such as the Cobalt and the proposed Alatus here adds to the historic atmosphere of a building. I mean, of an area. Just across the street from the proposed building, well, next to it, of course, is the historic Pillsbury Library, but across the street is the one of the first buildings in the city, situated on a little park, so that we do have a sense of the history of the neighborhood. But the argument is that the more modern and high-rise developments actually accent and help make this or advertise it as a historic neighborhood. So I come urging approval of the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak in favor of this project? Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Victor Gramsch. I live at 132 Bank Street Southeast, about a half a block from the site. I normally appear before you as president of the Nicodile East Bank Neighborhood Association. Today I am not. I am speaking in my official capacity. NEBNA has not made any findings about this project. As someone said, I think as you said earlier, this is the fourth time through the project, and I think it's worth reviewing that in response to the EQB matter, the finding of fact was that this project is in compliance with the city, with the comprehensive plan. And of course, the HPC matters have been dealt with by having a certificate of appropriation has already been issued, and so those matters are brought up. So now we're looking, or are dealt with. So now we're looking at an appeal of these two matters from the Planning Commission, the approval of the Planning Commission. And I just note that the purpose of the zoning code is, the prime purpose is, quote, to implement the policies of the comprehensive plan. Okay, it is not the purpose of the zoning code to thwart the purposes of the comprehensive plan. So now we have a building that is known to be in compliance with the plan and with the heritage preservation guidelines in the area. So now we have a issue for height. In this site, and I think many sites in the city, 56 feet is a limit. At any building, anywhere exceeding that limit needs to have a conditional use permit. And the rules under which the conditional use permit are issued are basically qualitative. They are not quantitative. As a matter of fact, there's no maximum limit specified in the approval process for conditional units for height, and that very large increases over the threshold level have been approved in this neighborhood at buildings like Cobalt and Larive and Pinnacle and Falls. I also note that a relatively comparable building, LPM Tower over in Loring Park, which is a neighborhood in some ways similar to ours. Certainly we based some of our small area plan on Loring Park experience. The approval was from 35 feet because of the shoreline district at 376 feet, 10 times the limit. So I think the idea that a large increase in height is not unknown in the city and is fairly common. And I think much the same analysis would go for the floor area ratio, that there are standards that have to be met, but those standards don't specify any kind of limits. And I can say that my experience with the city over 15 years is you know how to write detailed regulations when you want to. And if you wanted to have either a maximum height or you wanted to have different standards for different levels of variance, you certainly have the capability of doing that, at least with regard to neighborhood association policies.
Could you complete your remarks?
Yes, okay. And so I rise to speak to this project. I think this project has had adequate, more than adequate review, and I do think that it does, in fact, enhance the neighborhood and meet the needs of the plan for sustainability and for growth. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak in favor of the project, against the appeals? Okay, there'll still be time at the end if anyone changes their mind. With that, I would like to ask the folks who've appealed the project to please begin with a similar presentation, and then we'll have 2 minutes for each member of the public. Thank you.
Good morning. Committee members, Chair Bender, my name is Bill Griffith, representing the Neighbors for East Bank Livability. By now, I'm probably a familiar face. There's been a lot of hearings as referenced by the other testifiers. And yet this is probably and is the most important hearing. Why? Because this will ultimately decide the approval of the project. And I want to correct a couple statements to begin with. First of all, the issues of historic preservation and environmental protection and sustainability were not left behind in those other hearings. When your regulations for variance or conditional use permit reference consistency with the comprehensive plan, they bring all those issues back in. All those issues are within this record, and that's why we included in the record all those prior discussions and reports. So just to put it on the record, when you, consistent with state law, reference consistency with the comprehensive plan, you bring back to life all of those policies for this discussion. So that's point number one. Point number two, and it goes to a statement that Developers Council made at the last hearing, that the variance is necessary to sort out a mishmash of policies and plans that affect the development of this site. First of all, I don't know if I'd characterize your well-crafted plans as policies as a mishmash. I hope they're not a mishmash. But more importantly, the way you, if there are conflicting policies, and there are here, there are contradictory policies in your comprehensive plan. It's a little like the Bible. You can find a passage for any proposition you want to take. But the way you sort through that, those contradictory plans, is by implementing your comprehensive plan through zoning controls. And so therefore, our most important point today is if the city wanted to give this site a free pass on height and density as it relates to your zoning controls, the legal regulations that are operative on this site, then your charge was under the Metropolitan Land Planning Act to amend those controls. Because that's how we know when there's a tie or there's a conflict or a contradictory policy, that's how we know what you intended for this site. You didn't do that hard work. You can still do that hard work if you so choose. It will require you to think comprehensively about this site and its zoning and other C2 zone sites in the city. But to say that we can just take this policy or this plan and apply it to this project but not another is the height of arbitrary decision making. And I think that's what we want you to avoid here. Because we as residents of this community know that you will be challenged on the next site and the next site and the next site. And different arguments will be brought to bear Other concerns will be raised, but ultimately, it's the integrity of the decision-making that's at issue here. The integrity of the decision-making is at issue. Mr. Lux does very, very nice projects. We know that. Primarily, he's done them in the downtown core, but elsewhere. He's done very large projects, very dense projects in the downtown core, as your policies and plans suggest. Now we're over on the East Bank. Now we'd like to do something of downtown scale on the East Bank. And your planning staff has suggested that that's allowed by this review of the plans and policies and codes and how they all work together. But we still find over 20 policies within the comprehensive plan that contradict this project. So how do you sort that out? You sort that out through your zoning controls. And many of the planners in the room would understand day one, comprehensive planning, zoning, the plan is guidance, the plan is forward-looking, the plan is about the future of the city. And what you do to regulate land is you amend your official controls, the zoning ordinance. We don't get to construct this really complicated web that only you, the city council, decides on a case-by-case basis. It should be held up consistently, equally, uniformly to each and every project. And therefore, I should be able to, on the next parcel that's guided, zoned, and planned in the same way, build a 42 or maybe a 50-story tower. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure when I come in and file an application in this city what I will be able to build until I go through this process. And that's the arbitrary nature of granting a variance where there are no special circumstances. Now, you've heard staff and developers council say the special circumstances arise from the confluence of plans and policies and regulations that restrict the development of this property. But that is not the basis for a variance. The basis for a variance under Minnesota law are special circumstances unique to the property that are not based on economic considerations alone, that create a hardship. Are you telling me that if Mr. Lux were to build an 8-story tower consistent with the historic guidelines, that would be a hardship on this site? I don't think so. I don't think you can make that case. Are you telling me that he has woodlands or wetlands or steep slopes or some special character of this property, highly erodible soils that make this so unique that we cannot apply the zoning controls that you've adopted to this site? No, I don't think that's the case either. What we have here, council members, is a case of something we like. We like Mr. Lux, we like his projects, and we don't want to do the hard work of amending the zoning controls to create that kind of consistency between planning and zoning that should be operating on this site. And so the result is a 600% increase. I think that is a warning sign. We were told that we shouldn't be concerned about the magnitude. That also is Planning 101. If a planner sits in the first day of their planning school, they're going to say, if you have a minimal variance that protects the neighborhood, is in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance, you're probably okay. As the needle moves and redlines to 600%, folks, that should be a warning sign to you that you've essentially set aside that regulation. Go ahead and amend the code. You have the discretion. You know that. You have the discretion to amend the code, but that will require hearings. That will require you to make sure that it's consistent with your comprehensive plan. That will invite others in your community into the conversation about whether this should happen here, there, or elsewhere. But we're not doing that. We're giving this developer, excuse the expression, a political favor. That's what it is. If it's not based on law, it's a political favor to this developer because, hey, he's got a good track record. Do we really want our zoning controls to be used and abused based upon whether we like the developer and like what they're proposing? I don't think so. I don't think that's the correct use of land use and zoning. It really undermines the integrity of the process and the trust that these people, my clients, have for you in this room. And I know it's making us all uncomfortable to hear these words, but folks, if I don't say it today, it's going to be said in another forum and another forum, and you're going to hear it eventually. Maybe not for this project, maybe for the next project, but ultimately you're going to have to come to grips with the truth of the matter. And I hate to be, kind of in your face. I'd like us all to, feel like we've accomplished something good here. but we have to present this truthfully, honestly, and with the integrity that my clients expect. Now, ultimately, you are the decision maker in this case. But ultimately, it sets a precedent. And the reason it sets a precedent is because if there is no special circumstance for granting this variance, then anybody can meet the standard. That's the nature of a variance. So with that, I will close. The record is hundreds of pages long. I don't need to go on at length, but I think you understand what we're saying here. If you don't follow your own rules, if you don't follow state law in amending your code to match your plan, to really say what you mean can be done here, then you have circumvented the law. You have given a political favor to a developer you like and a project you like, and you've undermined your own zoning scheme. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? We'll go ahead then and allow anyone from the public who'd like to speak to please come up. Welcome you to state your name and address for the record. If you haven't signed in with the clerk before speaking, please do so after you speak. Welcome.
Good morning, members of the Zoning and Planning Committee. My name is Eric Wunderlich. I live in the Marcy Homes neighborhood at 413 5th Street Southeast, which is a single-family home in the Southeast 5th Street Historic District. And I'm here today to speak on behalf of Neighbors for East Bank Livability, an expanding grassroots group of folks living in the Marcy Homes, Nicollet Island, East Bank, other East Bank neighborhoods, and now neighborhoods across the city that are concerned about what's going on here. And I speak in support of Neighbors for East Bank Livability's appeal of the City Planning Commission's approval of a conditional use permit, increasing the maximum allowed height for a building by 750% from 4 stories to 42 stories, and a zoning variance allowing a 600% increase in maximum floor area ratio from 2.04 to 14.42. The Minneapolis City Council does not have legal authority to make legislative changes on a piecemeal basis, which is effectively what's being attempted here. While they do have latitude to make exceptions under certain circumstances, in this case, all bounds of reasonable discretion are broken. And I ask you to reflect on some potential consequences should this project go forward as proposed. Similarly zoned properties across the city could suddenly have land values exceeding 10 times the value of existing improvements. Why would owners bother to maintain properties that have the potential for that kind of payday? Why would any developer pursue moderate priced housing on these properties when they could make that kind of money with this kind of a development? It's playing roulette with the city's real estate. That's why we have master plans, comprehensive plans, small area plans, historic district plans. It's a legal set of rules that work with zoning in concert to provide long-term guidelines that allow for fair and predictable balance of development, neighborhood stability, and community livability. The action of the Planning Commission that we're appealing today is not within the Council's legal authority. We're not opposed to development. We're not opposed to density. We are opposed to reckless development aided by the city's ad hoc approach to zoning and planning, and we ask you today to support our appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person, please. And then, interest of time, could folks please line up and so we can use our time most efficiently. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jeff Wright. I live at 178 Bank Street Southeast, which is a Lord Square development, a modest 3-story development about 100 feet from this development, which will loom over our modest development. I moved in 4.5 years ago because of the livability aspect of this neighborhood, and I'm not opposed to development either. I understand that progress needs to be made. But this development seems completely out of scale. The last time I spoke, I used the word common sense. Now we have some very good legal grounding for why a 600 to 750% increase is not appropriate, besides just common sense. I'm the treasurer of Neighbors for East Bank Livability. We have been raising money to fight this development and to prevail. We've raised a lot of money. We've raised money from over 100 people in dozens of neighborhoods and developments around this project. We did it without nonprofit status. Now we have nonprofit status, and we have had increased interest in the community to support our organization and fight this project. that's evidence of a community groundswell, people who live there, not just Marcy Homes, which is mostly renters and some folks a couple of miles away from this development, but folks like myself and many people that are on our committee and have contributed money, putting their money where their mouth is. The fact that this neighborhood groundswell isn't apparently being listened to is disturbing, as well as the legal arguments. And I'm not a lawyer. I'll leave the legal arguments to our very excellent lawyer. But we continue to have donations coming in. We expect them to increase now that we have nonprofit status. We're not going away. We want to see sanity prevail. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Joel Nelson, and I live at Lord Square, 144 Bank Street. I ask the committee today to reject the Alatus proposal. The guidelines for this historic district call for buildings of modest height to protect the integrity and historic character of this unique area. The Nye building and buildings close to the A Mill have tried to do this, but the Alatus proposal has failed. The staff report for the Planning Commission argues that Alatus fits in with other high-rises in the area, specifically La Rive, and concludes that a variance in height is deserved. That rationale is incorrect. It is also incomplete. It's incorrect because Alatus is 50% bigger than La Rive, and that's an important qualitative difference. It's incomplete because La Rive was built many years before current zoning ordinances were in place. As far as I understand it, the builder offers no convincing rationale for height other than this is what he wants. Some members of the council have defended the height of the Alatus building. They argue that the high-rise residences are a trend and exist in many other cities. Trends, however, are just statistical descriptions. They are not moral imperatives. Trends may be dangerous and followed at one's peril. The peril that I fear is this. Standing on University Avenue and looking across the street, I will see a high-rise dwarfing the Pillsbury Library and impairing its visual beauty. An additional peril is the multiplication of high-rises in the historical district. In conclusion, I'd like to say there's an alternative, perhaps the Minneapolis way, where new developments enhance, not just coexist, with the district's heritage. Doing this would take courage, but would make Minneapolis a leader in historical preservation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Catherine Hahn-Skirring. I am the board president for Preserve Minneapolis. I live at 3849 Harriet Avenue. On behalf of the board of Preserve Minneapolis, we're here to support the neighborhood group, or the Neighbors for East Bank Livability, in their appeal, and also would like to indicate that the precedent for a 42-story building, it does set a precedent. There are tall buildings in this neighborhood, but not nearly that high, and we have concerns as a board that this would lead to other substantially tall high-rises, which would erode the character of the historic district, which could potentially and ultimately lead to the district being delisted from the National Register. And I don't know if anyone in Minneapolis would like to lose our heritage in this area, which is the birthplace of Minneapolis. And I for sure, as personally as a citizen of Minneapolis, would like to be able to take my son over to this area, and so he can see it and he can live his heritage too. Apologize. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker, please. Come on up. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Pam Kaufman. I live at 110 Bank Street. I support the appeal of the approval of a conditional use permit to increase the maximum allowed height of the 200 Central Avenue Southeast project from 4 stories to 56 feet to 42 stories, 483 feet. I would like you to close your eyes and don't fall asleep though, and visualize that you are driving north from downtown on the 3rd Avenue Bridge. It's rush hour, so you are moving slowly or stopped. See the Winslow House condominium with its organic color and shape up ahead. Now see a very, very tall vertical thing rising behind it. You can't tell me that that structure doesn't look ridiculous. It's way out of scale. Now, while you are still patiently waiting in traffic on the bridge, glance over to your left and find the LaRive condo that Alatus likes to refer to. LaRive is not on the major thoroughfare of Central Avenue. It is a full city block west of Central and the Lord's Place townhouses, grass, and 2 deep rows of lovely shade trees are in between. Like Winslow House, LaRive grows up organically from the trees along the river. Plus, these condos were built before the very wise rule makers made the current zoning rules to protect the very heart of what makes Minneapolis, Minneapolis. Do you really want future residents and visitors looking across at the east bank of the river from the west bank or downtown and wonder, what was this city thinking? They sure ruined it. Or maybe they'll just laugh. For the record, I do not shun modern architecture. On the contrary, one of my favorite buildings in Minneapolis is the Weissman Art Museum. So I'm saying, don't roll over for Alatus for the money. You can do better for Minneapolis. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, Joanne Netlin, 110 Bank Street, Southeast. This is an article from the New York Times opinion pages. Something interesting happened to the millennials. As predicted, the supposedly narcissistic generation finally moved out of their parents' homes, stayed in meaningful jobs, and became civic-minded. With pride, they also discovered their city's most treasured identity, history. And now they live, eat, and drink and be merry in cities like Boston, Philadelphia, Charleston, San Francisco, and San Antonio. Cities that cherish their historic districts, saying no to any building that did not fit their prescribed vision. They could build elsewhere. Woe to the cities that didn't follow their comprehensive plans and could only see millions of tax dollars. If they just changed their permits and approved variances. Today, they have no districts in their cities with storied paths, personal neighborhoods, or tourist-friendly destinations. Millennials found their other cities that answered their needs for quaintness, history, and social progressiveness. We look at one such city that simply ignored its historic beginnings to yield to the greed of developers wanting to build skyscrapers. Minneapolis was at the brink of preserving the East Bank, its most precious original neighborhood. With historic neighborhood guidelines to halt any more tall buildings, the city ignored them and their own Heritage Preservation Committee. 40 to 55-story skyscrapers were built, prompting the National Trust for Historic Places to put Minneapolis on the list of its America's most endangered historic cities. Back in 2016, Council member Lisa Goodman said, "We'd have more, in my opinion." Council member Jacob Fry even posted developers' building plans on his social website and wrote, "We can preserve historic character and simultaneously make our own history," in 2016. But that was only for a year. History shows the millennials moved on. Many never arrived in Minneapolis. Once the public became educated about the value of historic districts, it was too late. This is a look into the future, published October 18th, 2026, just 10 years from now.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good morning. My name is Chris Coy, and I live in a single-family home at 419 5th Street Southeast in the Marcy Homes neighborhood. I'm feeling a serious case of deja vu this morning, although it actually technically isn't deja vu, because I have been here before, just like so many of us gathered here today. And this time around, I'm asking you to support our appeal of the Planning Commission's August 29th approvals for the Alatus project. Let me ask you a simple question. Why are you still considering approving this 42-story tower? The city zoning code does not allow the granting of a conditional use permit for a 483-foot tower just because the developer wants it. Clearly, this building is completely out of scale, particularly within the historic district. I understand that variances allow a certain amount of wiggle room, but let's be honest. A building 10 times allowable height and a floor area ratio 600% greater, that isn't a simple variance for you to consider. It requires you to look the other way as you ink up your rubber stamp. Alatus has proposed out-of-scale projects like this tower in both Arden Hills and Rochester. In both cities, the mayors and city councils have publicly expressed their concerns about the size of the developments that in both cases not only violate their zoning codes, but their visions for the future of each community. Why is it that none of you have second thoughts about approving this project? Is it that you share Councilman Fry's belief that by allowing this monument to greed and vanity to be built, there will be a trickle-down effect in the real estate market that benefits us all? I can't believe that's the case, but whatever your reason, please reconsider and support this appeal, and in so doing, deny the approval of this 42-story tower. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person, please. How many more people would like to speak? Okay.
Hi, my name is Saralyn Romanishin. I'm a resident of the Wedge neighborhood, where we are intimately aware of the repercussions of our city's mistaken reliance on market-driven development and unsound development practices. I strongly support the appeal by the neighbors for the East Bank livability. The CUP and the variances, including the floor area ratio, all violate the basics of what these neighbors stand for, livability. You know, this reminds me of an ancient fable, retold in many variations and languages. It is a tale of human ego used to teach children and forgetful adults humility. This behemoth has become a symbol to the residents of this city. It is a towering height of 42 stories, not downtown, but at Central and 2nd on the bluff, looming over the historic district and casting a pall over Southeast. Another elite citadel that's main purposes are profit, satisfying a grand scheme of density, and killing migrating birds. It is an ominous precedent for our city. We, as humans, often forget lessons learned, such as those from the 1960s and 70s in this very city. We must, unfortunately, experience mistakes personally or, if smart, use fables and history as learning tools to save us from ego and greed. Alatus, Tower of Babel. Our leadership's misguided pride is being paid for by the people. I ask now, what will you, as our leaders, not do in the name of density? At this point, looking around the city, I now believe there are no limits. This is not about what we need, but what you want. Please prove me wrong. Please vote for the appeal and deny the CUP and variances. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. And if anyone else would like to speak, please come on up.
Hello, my name is Chris Martinson, and I reside at 2930 Harriet Avenue. I support the appeal. I have 3 questions. Mr. Lutz stated that he started working with stakeholders 2 years ago, and there seems to be some type of collusion between the city council member, Fry, and the developer, possibly, because on May 21st of 2015, Councilmember Fry initiated the Very High Density Comprehensive Plan Amendment. So I have a question about that. It just seems, like there could be possible collusion. My second question is, I'm wondering if it is the typical action of the city of Minneapolis to, when they're working on an amendment, to put out letters to the effective jurisdictions prior to the amendment being officially adopted by the city council. And Haley Mays put out letters to the affected jurisdictions December 3rd of 2015. And so I'm just wondering if that's typical with the city of Minneapolis to, operate before an official act or official adoption of an amendment. And my third question is just wondering, when this amendment was finally approved by the Met Council. And I just look at these actions by the city as being tied into arbitrary use of power. Thank you.
Thank you. And we can have a response to those questions about the comprehensive plan amendment after the public hearing. Come on up, please.
My name is Barbara Cam. I'm a resident of Marcy Homes. I live at 423 7th Street Southeast. I just have a couple of points, and I'll be brief. This building, Alatus, is not really going to be the gateway to Marcy Homes and thought of as such within the entire city of Minneapolis. Actually, very few people outside of the city council, the developers, the neighboring areas such as Northeast, East Bank really know or have heard of Marcy Homes. It's really an extension of downtown moving across the river. Perhaps the most important point that has been brought up today is that the conditional use permit, which is being appealed, really depends on financial and economic reasons rather than any hardship, which is really what is required for conditional use. I ask that the Zoning and Planning Commission, Madam Chair, and members of the commission reject this plan and vote for the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Anyone else? I'll do last call. Okay, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Ms. Hofstad, I can reopen the public hearing if you'd like to speak. We'll briefly reopen the public hearing. Welcome, Ms. Hofstad.
Sorry, sometimes a little difficult to hear. I'm Diane Hofstad, 610 Ramsey Street. It is within the jurisdiction and the purview of this committee to make adjustments to this proposal or deny the application. The history of this council and members of the committee have demonstrated support of the community, environment, and historic needs of our city. Our mayor as a city council member was such a champion. I ask for your support for the reduction in the height and size of this structure. You have the legal support to deny and reduce the impact of the structure within the Minneapolis zoning code, the Minneapolis comprehensive plan, the historic preservation guidelines, and past actions of the city council and committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Okay.
Hi, my name is Frank Alarcon. I live at 25 West 35th Street. I'd like just to chime in briefly as an actual millennial. I think many people in our generation do respect historical preservation, and we are interested in capturing and preserving the history of the places where we live. But we also pay rent, and many of us hope to afford a property someday. And we want to live in. I can't speak for my entire generation. We're not monolithic, but many of us want to live in a community that's walkable, that's accessible to transit, accessible to bikeways. And when I kind of examine this proposal and I look at where it's located, that's what I see. This if these condos ever fall within my price range, I would absolutely consider living in a neighborhood like the one like Marcy Homes. So I hope we're really thinking about walkability, livability, access to transit, and locating people in places where they don't need to depend on a car. So I would strongly urge the committee to reject the appeal and support the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Anyone else? This will be final call. We will then close the public hearing. Mr. Poor, we did have a couple of questions about the comprehensive plan update. I think the questions were, what was the notification procedure before that plan amendment was adopted? And then also, what is the status of the Met Council's action on that update to our comprehensive plan?
Madam Chair, the process for notification was standard. The amendment to the comp plan was initiated before this project was submitted for review. There was approximately 30 partners identified. Those are identified. It's not arbitrary. It's the partners we deal with, other governmental agencies. And the Met Council has approved that amendment to their comp plan, or to their planning document.
Okay, thank you. Do any of the council members have any questions, or is there a motion? Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will move to deny the appeal, and that's based off of, and I'll just speak to it, based off of the Planning Commission's recommendations, along with staff recommendations. I see thorough findings that I've read through in a strong case. So I don't know if we need to actually direct staff, though, to, so we do need to direct staff to draft findings based off of this.
Okay, is there any discussion on the motion in front of the committee? No, I can just speak briefly as someone who's had a lot of opportunity to hear from folks about this. I think that we've heard a lot of thoughtful feedback from folks who have very different ideas about how this building fits into the community. I think, though, it's important to recognize and remember that the small area plan and the comprehensive plan that guide this area do have a lot of policies supportive of a building like this one. And the Marcy Homes small area plan in particular talks a lot about pedestrian scale design, about being thoughtful about where to put tall buildings. And so I think our staff will do the fine-tuned legal work, but as a policy statement, I would say that there's been a lot of land use policy directing this area that supports this building. I do also want to note that it is just one voice, but the Marcy Homes Neighborhood Organization did submit an official letter of support of this project. Just because we had fewer people here today to speak in favor of the project doesn't mean that there is no support in the community. And again, there is certainly different ideas and division and on both sides, but I did want to reflect that, which is part of the record. I also wanted to note just a small thing, but this is the first building that I know of in Minneapolis that will have a significant look to bird-safe glass implementation as part of the Planning Commission conditions of approval of the site plan review. I moved to include the recommendations of the Audubon Society of Minneapolis, and the developer has agreed to make the building, the first 60 feet of the building, bird safe. I think it'll be an interesting case study pilot project for guidance we could consider in the future. And again, that was agreed to by the developer, but also is part of the legal conditions of approval that came through the Planning Commission. So that's what I had to say about that. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that carries. We do have two more.
Madam Chair?
Oh,
real quick, just in,
Mr.
I apologize, just in response to Councilmember Johnson's question, I think based on the fact that there was new testimony today, that it's always advisable to direct staff to supplement the findings as necessary.
Absolutely.
And if you'd like to do that, I would appreciate it.
Madam Chair, I thought that was part of my addition in the motion.
So
direct findings.
I believe that Councilmember Johnson did move to direct staff to prepare findings, but we can separately just ensure that we've taken that motion. So this would be then on the motion to deny the two appeals, as well as to direct staff to supplement the findings of fact. All those in approval, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that carries. So thank you for everyone who's come. I know that folks will be leaving and coming and going. We do have two more items on our agenda, including one more item under the public hearings. This is item number 3, which is passage of an ordinance related to aircraft noise attenuation. I don't imagine we'll have a lot of public testimony about this. It is a relatively simple change that's moving our regulations about airport noise mitigation from our zoning code to our building code. I don't know if staff wants to make a brief presentation about this or if that's sufficient. Is there staff here to present about item number 3? Okay. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on item number 3? Okay. So then I will just go ahead and move approval of item number 3. Oh, thank you. I will open the public hearing. Would anyone like to speak? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Thank you for the reminder. I will move item number 3. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That carries. And then our last item is an update again on our comprehensive plan. We are at the end of the lifespan of our last comprehensive plan and undertaking an update which will be adopted in 2018. Ms. Mays is here to bring forward the civic engagement calendar. This shouldn't have any surprises in it for council members who've been engaged for many months now in guiding the civic engagement plan, but this is our opportunity to officially act on this proposal. And so we'll have Ms. Mays just come up and remind everyone what we have in store coming up over the next few months. While she's getting ready, I will note that we've had staff from across the city enterprise engaged in doing some preparatory work for the comp plan, identifying the big trends that we've seen in data, the issues that we need to check in with our community about. So this is kind of the beginning of that next phase starting in October, which will have some presentations and briefing to council members, as well as a public presentation at Committee of the Whole coming up in October, and then some public meetings at the end of the month. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Hayes.
Okay, good morning. I'm going to go through a presentation that sort of places us where we are and provides an update on the civic engagement plan, our activities to date, and the calendar moving forward. As you know, we're in the midst of a fairly large-scale update to our comprehensive plan, looking at a lot of different major topics that impact us on a regular basis. The plan process is organized around 6 key values and centered on a series of internal research teams and external engagement events. I'm going to go, as I said before, I'm going to go through the civic engagement calendar. This is in reference to City Council action that was taken back in July to adopt our civic engagement plan and to request additional detailed schedule and community engagement and a summary of engagement to date. So this covers both of those things. This is a quick rehash of our civic engagement goals that are the cornerstone of our civic engagement plan, ensuring that we have meaningful and relevant dialogue, inclusive representation, access to information and opportunities, contributions that have impact, empowering experience, and effectively used resources. These values are being applied consistently throughout all the activities we are doing. Some of the methods, the engagement plan has a large index of different tools and methods. It's available online and in council records for anyone who's interested. This is just highlighting a few that we've used in the near term around large convening, in-person interaction, technology-based tools, and creative tools. The goal really is to give a variety of different venues and opportunities for people to engage in the plan in ways that they find accessible, relevant, and maybe even fun, and especially speaking to those who are less likely to be involved, have been historically underrepresented in city processes. Indeed, most of our resources in this process are gained towards those populations rather than the folks who are more likely to be involved regardless of the tools and techniques we use. The map you see, the picture you see here is from the Meeting in the Box tool particularly, which is to encourage those who already have some capacity, who can convene their own meeting, convene their own work, and bring together people to share ideas and share them with us, to empower them to do that themselves so we can concentrate city resources on those who are less organized. Phase 1 launch has been effectively completed. It was in spring and summer of 2016. Its purpose really was about raising awareness of the comprehensive plan. As a lot of you know, it's not a well-known document to the entire population. In fact, quite a few people live most of their lives without being directly engaged in it. So this is an opportunity to open that up and really to let them know what it is and to frame the discussion so that when they provide input, we can make sure it's effective and used well and a good use of everyone's time. This is just a listing here of a lot of the engagement events that have taken place to date around large convenings at the Community Connections Conference, attending a series of street festivals, not festivals we held, of course, but opportunities where people were already there and we could catch their attention. Community dialogues with certain targeted groups, using technology tools to make this available online for the many people who have access there, and starting to engage artists and other creative folks in the process to sort of open up the way we're doing things, make it compelling, and really focus on getting people to actively participate. Just a few metrics so far of what we've accomplished. So far, if you look at the total number of sort of face-to-face interactions with people at street festivals and dialogues, the conference, we think there is probably well over 840, 850 sort of face-to-face interactions with individual citizens and others who are stakeholders. We have an email list of around 400 and growing. Our website, Minneapolis2040.com, has had over 17,000 page views, and everybody's spending about 2 minutes or so, which means they're not just clicking through, they're spending at least a little time looking around. And Twitter has had 50,000 impressions. I'm not the technical person to explain exactly what that means, but that effectively is a view. Someone has seen it or interacted with it in some way. So we are starting to get into substantial numbers. The information we're getting, we're compiling and sort of collating into some key themes to help guide our process. One thing we've committed to is ensuring that when we are gathering input, we're not just saying, thanks for the input, going along our merry way and doing what we want, but that we really are listening and using that information to inform our process. What you see here is a list of some of the major topics that have come up again and again amongst the different conversations we're hearing. We're hearing a lot about commitment to safer neighborhoods, improve relationships with the community, between the community, the city, and other people in the power structure. A lot about economic opportunity, and this is, again, we're targeting groups that are not as involved, so we're hearing those voices even somewhat louder than some of the other themes, which is great. Opportunities for economic prosperity and for job creation, workforce development and education, a lot about schools and that. Improve opportunities to do business in the city and actually to do business with the city, such as our procurement process. Looking for a more accessible public transportation system with more options and more frequency. Concerns about affordable housing and housing choice. Are they the right types of housing? Issues about gentrification, issues about is the neighborhoods together what people need and what they can afford. Improve and expanded bike and walking facilities, park and recreation. Where there's, of course, a lot of folks who are very interested in sustainability, green energy, healthy foods, and other sustainable practices, and access to healthcare. Well, as you look at this, you say, well, some of those things aren't necessarily things the city did, and that is part of us. As we move forward, we're going to be guiding more and more specifically the questions to focus on the things that we have control over. At this point, again, it's kind of a high level. What is your vision? What's really important? Another way to represent that is to summarize these two cards from two young ladies who were at the from the Phillips Indian Educators Attendance Celebration at the East Phillips Community Center. We had everything from hoverboards, very futuristic, to quiet, which was just a young person who wanted a quiet home where they could be able to sleep at night. So quite a range of needs. So that is a summary sort of where we are at phase one and the work that's been done to date. I'm going to go quickly through the rest of the phases, which touches on the engagement calendar, which you have in your packet. There are some dates. This one just has fall, summer. There's some specific months that go with this. But largely, since they are about seasons, it's not so much about a specific date at this point, but a marker in the process. This fall, staff is going to be sharing information and asking questions about topics such as housing, streets, and jobs, and a major rollout this coming month in October. Participants will have the opportunity to share their ideas for the future of the city. This is being organized around a series of events, 2 community open houses on October 25th and 27th, which are going to be open to everyone and provide a variety of sort of fun, family-friendly, and interesting activities. Again, focused on housing, streets, and jobs, but also on a bigger vision for the city that looks at the long-term picture. There's a series of community dialogues. These, again, are with targeted groups. They're listed there on the screen, the Native American population, African American, seniors, persons with disabilities, youth, Latino population, East African, and Southeast Asian, some of our targeted groups. These are face-to-face and culturally appropriate, if need be, bilingual conversations to ensure that there's a comfortable space that people can feel that they can represent their needs and the needs of their community. We, of course, will continue to have technology tools, including a mirror version of everything at the convenings will be available online. And our artists, we've hired some fantastic public artists to work with us, Monica Sheets, Eric Avery, Mike Hoyt, and others, to sort of bring together some creative ways to engage people with a real focus on equity and inclusion and creating a welcoming environment for those who come to a process not quite sure what it is, always. Phase 3, policy framework, will launch right after this. And I should say these phases are a little arbitrary. There's nothing magical about going from one to another. It's a continuous progression. It's mainly for our work planning purposes. But by this spring, around April, we're planning to have the next round of community engagement. This will really focus on what we heard in the fall, this coming month, and present options for shaping growth in the city. This is getting down to some very general policy direction and very general possibilities for directing policy. They will learn about those pros and cons of different options, scenarios, different approaches, and share their thoughts with staff. By summer, June, July, we're hoping to use it to have had a feedback loop on that to refine and sharpen these proposals and recommendations, and to have, by that point, a largely developed policy framework that has an outline of the topics. When I say policy framework, imagine the meat and substance of the comprehensive plan, not the full document, but what are the major chunks of information that will be in there. Participants will have content at these meetings to engage in. It won't just be us asking questions, but them reacting to draft materials. Of course, we'll be coming back to City Council and other venues to share as we go as well, as those become more defined. By fall, I think it says around September in your outline, there's going to be some discussion about the development of the policy document. This is saying we're taking the content and starting to build out the full document. You see a picture here of our existing comprehensive plan. The engagement will have an opportunity to provide feedback on the document as it stands. This is not the final version, of course, but by fall, our hope is to have a lot of the document substantially complete so we can start acting on different pieces and fleshing them out further. Now, if you know the time frame, you know that we do not actually have to have it done before 2018, but we are having to reserve most of 2018 for our phase 5, which is review. That is because Council requires a very extensive internal and external consultative process. So that though that is an entire year, it is probably not too much time to ensure that we have all our I's dotted, T's crossed with regards to requirements, and we have several different opportunities for review. At that point, it'll be much more formal, much more through the Planning Commission and City Council process, less interactive because it's more of a fully developed document at that point. And that ends sort of the sort of sequence of timing and different engagement events. Are there any questions at this time?
Are there any questions for staff?
Sure.
Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate this update. I know that it is a difficult situation right now in long-term planning with regard to leadership and the stress that it's putting on our long-term planning staff. And I think that this presentation was timely and needed, and it's proof to us that the remaining staff, Mr. Byers, Ms. Mays, are totally on top of what's going on. And it was well worth having this report today. And I just want you to know that members of the committee really appreciate your work, and you don't hear it enough. And this has been very stressful, and I completely understand it. But it seems like you guys are really on the right track, and I just want to thank you both for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Reich?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd extend the appreciation that Councilmember Goodman extended for the work going forward, and really appreciate that, having this well thought out structure really reinforces sort of the graphic directional that we will keep moving forward. These key pieces will be forward movement. It won't be extended circular discussions trying to figure out what we said the last time when we said it the last time kind of conversations. And so you can't get that forward movement without good structure. And I think you do have actually logical, thoughtful alignment of the steps. I think there is a logic to it and a flow to it. And so I want to comment on that as well. So thank you.
Thank you. I would echo that. I'm really excited about the comprehensive plan update phases that are coming up, where we're really digging into what's happening in our city, the great things that we're building upon, and the challenges that we'll be able to tackle through this policy. I have a motion for the committee. I've emailed it to the clerk and the members. So I'll move to approve the Minneapolis 2040 Civic Engagement Calendar and direct staff to implement the engagement activities outlined in this calendar. Staff is also directed to report back to the Zoning and Planning Committee for approval of any requests that would result in significant expansion of this calendar that would require additional staff resources. And we've had significant engagement with council members by staff to really shape this engagement strategy. It is a significant expansion of the program that we did last time, or that you did last time for the update. So the intention of this staff direction is to ensure that staff aren't being pulled in a million different directions. If things come up that are great ideas about how we could expand this engagement strategies, we'll have it come back here and just make sure that we're supporting our staff in the good work you're doing, and again, reflecting all of the input that we've been able to have from community stakeholders and council members to get us to this point with a calendar ahead. And this will keep us on track as we move forward again into the exciting policy development phases of the plan. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in approval, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that carries. Thank you very much for all of your hard work. Again, coordinating many staff across the enterprise on this. And that is our last item. We are adjourned.